Welcome back to Ultimate Spider-Man Saturdays. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, the Ultimate Universe was a different version of the Marvel Universe. Some things you know, some things were completely different. But the best stories that came out of the Ultimate Universe were the Ultimate Spider-Man storylines, and we've been bringing them to you just about every Saturday. Today we're going to be covering Volume 5. Now, in our last video, Peter found out that Norman Osborn is back in town. Norman invited Peter over to his penthouse to tell him that he knows that he's Spider-Man, and the whole thing about him being a superhero, it's now over. After injecting himself with a bunch of Oz serum, Peter managed to fight back Norman until Harry landed the final blow, stabbing into his back. With everything that's been going on, Peter decided that it was time to focus on his schoolwork. But while sitting around in the library studying, Mary Jane runs in asking Peter if he's got his costume today. Peter asks her what's going on, so Mary Jane turns on the news and tells him that there's a giant rhino destroying things downtown. Peter runs back to suit up, and Mary Jane turns back to the TV singing, "My boyfriend's gonna kick your butt." As Peter runs over to his locker to grab his backpack, he turns the corner and sees Aunt May. He asks what she's doing here, and May tells him that she's here for a teacher-parent meeting. Peter tells her actually he's really busy right now, but that's when Peter's math teacher, Mr. Del Palma, opens the door stating that it's just about time. Why don't you both come in? As they enter and sit, Mr. Del Palma tells May that Peter is a rather exceptional student, but lately he's been rather distracted. She looks over at Peter, who's looking out the window, and then Peter turns back asking, "What?" Peter tells them both sorry, but he's actually supposed to be helping an exchange student right now, and he feels kinda bad not being there. May tells him to go on ahead then. They'll talk more tonight during dinner. So he jumps up telling them thank you, and he runs out of the room. As he runs outside, he begins to hear someone sobbing over a pile of trash. He looks over to see Gwen sitting there in the trash, and he asks her if everything's okay. Through her sobs, she tells him no, she's fine. Loving life, in fact. Peter stops for a moment and tells her, okay, he's gotta get going. But Gwen shouts, "Fine, go ahead and leave her, just like your mother did." Peter turns asking, "What are you talking about?" And Gwen says that she overheard her mother talking to someone. She's planning on leaving her father and saying how her life at home is terrible. Peter tries to tell her that maybe she's just trying to blow off some steam, but Gwen shouts, "No!" Her exact words were, "My life in this house sickens me. I hate the people life stuck me with." She goes back to crying, and Peter realizes he really has to go. So he tries to tell her that he would love to stay, really, but he has something to do. Gwen tells him fine, but Peter tells her he'll be back and find her after school, he promises. After finally managing to get away, he suits up and swings downtown, and just as he arrives, he sees that everything has already been handled by Iron Man. And as he sits on the light post, Peter then hears a man shouting to him, asking, "Where were you 10 minutes ago?" With no real answer, Peter swings back, thinking, at least he tried. A short while later, over at the First National Bank, Ben Urich stops by due to some issues that he's having with his ATM card, but as him and the teller talk, there's a sudden crash behind them and someone shouts, "Don't anyone move!" He turns back, he sees Spider-Man holding one of the guards, telling everyone that this is a robbery. After Spider-Man robbed the bank, Ben hurried over to the Daily Bugle, where Jonah was more than happy to get that press rolling. While Jonah tells everyone to start getting to work on a new Spider-Man story, Peter walks by asking why everyone's running around. But before anyone can answer him, Peter overhears the others having concerns about Spider-Man now being a bad guy. Ben begins to argue that the Spider-Man that he saw didn't seem like the normal Spider-Man. This one beat people. But Jonah shouts, telling him, "It doesn't matter! We're gonna post this story and that's that!" So as the day went on, the front page of the Bugle began to report, "Spider-Man, criminal!" As Peter takes the subway home, he thanks whoever that was that robbed the bank using his costume. Fight Doc Ock, Kingpin, heck, even the Green Goblin was bad enough, but this beats all by far. That, and the only person that he can even tell this all to would be Mary Jane, but even telling her about his powers is starting to seem like a mistake. Just as Peter begins to think to himself that he's going to find out whoever that is posing as him, he notices a police car in front of his house. He runs in asking if everything's alright, and then he sees Gwen sleeping on the couch. He then hears May speaking with Gwen's father George in the kitchen about Gwen's mother leaving them. As the two talk, May hears a creak and sees Peter standing there. She tells him that Captain Stacy here is going to be out of town for a bit, so she offered to let Gwen stay with them until he gets back. Not much longer later, Mary Jane stops by and Peter explains the situation with Gwen staying with them. Mary Jane then asks, why is she here though? And Peter says, because her mother up and left and her father is going out of town but then he stops asking, the way you said that was kind of angry. Are you angry? She begins to shout, what is she supposed to think with Gwen sleeping here in her pajamas? Peter tries to calm her down and then he asks, wait, "Do you not trust me?" And Mary Jane tells him, "I don't trust her. I see what's going on with her. Did you tell her that you're Spider-Man yet?" Peter begins to ask, "What are you even talking about?" Then Mary Jane doesn't answer and she leaves. Afterwards, Peter heads upstairs to study and Gwen says that she thought Mary Jane was supposed to join them. He tells her that he's not sure what happened with that, but then the news comes on the TV and the reports announce that there is currently a standoff with Spider-Man and the police. Peter looks at the TV and tells May that he has to run over to Mary Jane's for a second. He rushes back downtown to see the police surrounding a jewelry store, shouting for that fake Spider-Man to come out. Peter swings by and tells them to allow him. He's dying to talk to this guy himself. As Peter jumps onto the building, the police all shout for him to get down and put his hands up. He shouts, "Hey, I'm not the one robbing anything here. Heck, I don't even have pockets in this thing." One of the officers shouts to take him down and they all begin to open fire on Spider-Man. Most of the bullets fly past, but one hits Peter in the shoulder and he begins to fall. The officers all rush in to handcuff Peter, and Peter shouts to them to just listen for a second. The officers don't, and they pick him up, slamming him back onto their car, and they begin to pull his mask off, but as they do, Peter kicks back, knocking the officers away, and he jumps. As he begins to run, the officers open fire again, but this time Peter manages to dodge them all and run. He tells them that he needs to hurry. He has to fix his mask, and he also needs to get out of here. Using all of the strength that he has, he pulls the cuffs apart, and then a spotlight begins to shine down on him. The police helicopter begins to fly overhead, and one of the men hangs out, shooting a rifle down at him. After a short sprint, Peter manages to jump back down towards the ground and hide away in a dumpster. But over at Mary Jane's room, she's sitting writing in her journal about how lately she's been having nightmares, which is not normal for her. As she writes, she begins to hear her phone go off and an operator tell her that there's a collect call coming from Peter Parker. She tells him that she'll accept, and soon the line connects, and he says that his aunt just called looking for him. She's said to be home in 45 minutes in, but as she stops, she asks, what is he doing there? And all she can hear Peter saying is, "Help me." After a cab ride later, Mary Jane rushes to the dumpster that Peter told her to meet him at and finds him holding a gunshot wound. She tells him that they need to hurry and get him to a hospital, but Peter says they can't. They'll just arrest him there. Mary Jane tells him no, they're going to the hospital. She knows just how to do it. So a short while later, she takes Peter to the hospital. Without saying anything, Peter stumbles in and collapses onto a doctor. One of the doctors looks at Mary Jane and asks if he's with her, and she tells him no, and then he shouts for the others that they need to hurry and get him to the operating room. After surgery, Peter slowly begins to wake back up, and then he overhears the doctors speaking with some of the officers that they have a kid who just came in from a gunshot wound. The officer says that they're going to need to go and see and get a name out of him. But as they pull back the curtains, Peter is already gone. Back in the waiting room, Mary Jane waits to hear from Peter when the woman next to her looks at her. She looks down and sees her bag and notices the costume in it. Mary Jane just closes it. An officer comes out of the back stating that they need to lock this place down. The person in question has fled. So Mary Jane gets up and leaves, and as the doctor from before points at her telling her to wait, Mary Jane begins to run. After getting away, Peter and Mary Jane meet back up in a nearby building, and Mary Jane says that was so cool. Could you swing us home now? Peter tells her no. He's hopped up on painkillers and he doesn't even know how to find home right now. So not long after, May begins to wake up from sleeping on the couch since Peter hasn't come home. As she gets up, she checks on his room to see he's already fast asleep and decides to let him be for now. But as soon as the door shuts, Peter gets back up in pain and decides to just put on the news for a bit. As the TV comes on, the reporters interview Sergeant Bullet regarding the recent rumor that the man known as Spider-Man has now attempted to rob another bank. Bullet tells the camera that he wants to make things perfectly clear. Vigilante behavior will not be tolerated in this city, masks or not. As for Spider-Man, he is a coward and a thief, and he will pay for what he has done. The next day at school, Peter heads over to his locker to find a letter addressed to him in it. He opens it and it reads, "Black van in the parking lot. I'll take care of the shoulder." Peter checks around to see if anyone was looking when he read it, and when he sees there wasn't, he decides to check out the van. He goes out there to find it, and the door suddenly slides open. A woman leans out telling him that her name is Janet Van Dyne. Nick Fury sent her. Peter tells her that he doesn't need Nick Fury's help, and she tells him yes he does. So Peter winces, stating, "Fine, maybe I do." Once they get inside, Peter looks at Janet and asks if she is, and she tells him yes, she's the Wasp, card-carrying member of the Ultimates. If you're curious as to who the Ultimates are, they're this universe's Avengers. But as she looks at the wound, she says, "Actually, you're already healing pretty well. Do you have an increased healing factor?" And Peter tells her he's not sure, maybe. He hasn't been able to do much research on it. Janet tells him that's alright. She has something here that was a chemical in chickens that helps increase the healing of humans. So with a little playing around, she whipped up a little cocktail from his own blood samples. As she injects Peter with the medicine, he asks how do they get a blood sample, and she tells him that Nick got one from him. He should just consider himself lucky that they happen to be watching the news. Peter then asks if Nick mentioned anything about the guy who's running around robbing banks posing as him. And Janet tells him no, and no offense, they don't really focus on the small things. But she will say if someone was running around in her costume, she would go and beat the holy snot out of them. After school, Peter, Mary Jane, and Gwen all head back to Peter's house, where they are suddenly stopped as they see several police cars lining in front of the house. Peter runs inside shouting what's going on, but as the girls walk in, the two officers stand up. Gwen looks at them as they look at her, and they hand her George Stacy's badge. The officers explain that while they were at a police conference. Spider-Man was robbing an armored truck. They opened fire with their guns at him and they hit his backpack and it began to smoke. Spider-Man took the backpack off and threw it towards a small child. George ran in, grabbing the child, throwing him to safety, but as the bag landed in his lap, it exploded. Later that night, Peter and Mary Jane went to sit with Gwen on the roof as Peter tells her that her father was a hero. The only thing that she can say is, this is all because of Spider-Man. Spider-Man's fault. Peter tries to tell her that they don't know that. The more it's explained, it sounds like someone is posing as him, but Gwen stops him, stating she just wants to be alone for now. The next day, there are news reports about another robbery, and Peter wastes no time heading out to the scene. As he crashes through the window, he sees the imposter holding a woman hostage, staring right back at him. The fake Spider-Man shouts that he'll do it. He'll kill this woman right here, right now. So you better back away. The room fills with silence, and Peter shoots a web blast, knocking the taser out of the man's hand. As it goes flying, the man tries to jump away, but Peter smacks him down, stating, you just murdered a cop. The man tries to get back up, but Peter grabs him by the back of the neck and he punches him into a teller desk. The man fires a weak web shot, but Peter catches it. He then gets up, stating, if it's money you want, you can have it. It's right over there. Peter webs the man's chest and swings him towards him, asking, why me? Why use my costume? As he rips the man's mask off, the man says that it was nothing personal. Honest, he's just some guy. Peter throws the man, shouting, some guy? The world thinks Spider-Man is now a murderer, and it's all because of some guy who decided to put on my costume. He grabs the man by the throat, asking, what stops me from murdering you then? The grip around the man's throat tightens as Peter stares into his eyes, and then he lets go. He looks at himself for what he has just done, but as the police storm inside, they see the man hanging with a note. The man says, please, get me out of here! It was all me! I acted alone! And the officers take the note off as it reads, from the real Spider-Man. He heads off and stops back at home, telling himself he almost lost it. He could have killed that man, and then what would he be? But later, as Peter heads home, May finds Peter out front and tells him that they need to talk. Inside, Peter and May head into the room where Gwen Stacy is staying, and they tell her due to her situation with her mother, they were hoping that she may consider staying with them. The next day at school, Peter tells Mary Jane that they're going to be finishing up moving the rest of Gwen's stuff in and see what happens. And as he says that, Mary Jane turns away. She says that this isn't it. She thought it was, but this isn't it. Peter asks what she's talking about, and she shouts, us! This isn't what she thought it was gonna be like. But now every night she has nightmares. Horrible nightmares where he dies or she dies every night. Ever since that day in the bridge, she thought she could handle having a superhero boyfriend, but no, she can't. And the worst part is, she can't even tell him to stop because he won't. It's going to kill him one day. Then this, Gwen staying over? She's totally in love with you. Peter tries to tell her no, but Mary Jane just shouts, no, I'm not stupid. I just can't do this anymore. I love you, and I can't do this anymore. We're officially done, Peter Parker. And that concludes Volume 5. Now, I love the Ultimate Spider-Man series, but it does have a slow start, and now we're starting to get to the good bits. I hope you guys are enjoying this, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because every Saturday we're bringing you the Ultimate Spider-Man saga, all the way from the beginning to the end, and oh boy, does it end in one epic manner. Trust me, we pace this all the way out until that whole movie comes out. Hope you guys enjoy, and don't forget, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Comicstorian, and I'll see you next time right here.